Law 33. Discover each man's thumbscrew. Everyone has a weakness, a gap in the castle wall. That weakness is usually an insecurity, an uncontrollable emotion or need. It can also be a small secret pleasure. Either way, once found, it is a thumbscrew you can turn to your advantage. This law is really a lesson on body language and psychology and understanding why people do certain things and how they're covering up certain parts of their character and why they are. You can use it to manipulate, or you can use it just to find out more about a person to a positive advantage. That's not up to me, that's up to you. Finding the thumbscrew, a strategic plan of action. We all have resistances. We live with a perpetual armor around ourselves to defend against change and the intrusive actions of friends and rivals. One of the most important things to realize about people though is that they all have a weakness, some part of their psychological armor that will not resist, that will bend to your will if you find it and push it. Some people wear their weaknesses openly, others disguise them. Those who disguise them are often the ones most effectively undone through that one chink in their armor. In planning your assault, keep these principles in mind. Now, before I get into these principles, think about how they can apply to the modern day. Now, as soon as I read that, I thought of sport. I thought of athletes. I thought of Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant, he's a competitor, was an incredible competitor and athlete, champion. Now, the reason he's so great is because he would keenly observe and study his competitors, just like MJ did, just like all the greats did, and to find where their weaknesses are in their game, and then he would exploit them. The first principle is pay attention to gestures and unconscious signals. Sigmund Freud said no mortal man can keep a secret. If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips. Betrayal oozes out of him at every pore. This is basically saying that a person's weakness can be revealed in the most unimportant of gestures and passing words. Everyday conversations supply the richest mind of weaknesses. So train yourself to listen, train yourself to be aware. Start by always seeming interested. The appearance of a sympathetic ear will spur on anyone to talk. We've learned that in How to Win Friends and Influence People, how much people love to talk. A trick used by a French statesman, Talleyrand, was to appear to open up to the other person, to share a secret with them. But this secret can be completely made up. It doesn't even have to be real and no great importance to you. The important thing is that it should seem to come from the heart. Seem to be authentic, and this will usually elicit a response that is not only as frank as yours, but more genuine, or actual real response that reveals a weakness. Train your eye for the details, how someone tips a waiter, what delights a person, the hidden message in clothes. Find people's idols, the things they worship and will do anything to get. Perhaps you can get the supplier of their fantasies. What oozes out of the little things outside of our conscious control is what you want to know. Find the helpless man. Most weaknesses begin in childhood before the self builds up compensatory defenses. Perhaps the child was pampered or indulged in a particular area, or a certain emotion was unfulfilled. The indulgence or deficiency may be buried, but it never disappears. Knowing about childhood gives you a powerful key to a person's weakness. If your victims or rivals went without something important, such as a parental support when they were children, supply it. If they reveal a secret taste, a hidden indulgence, indulge it. In either case, they will be unable to resist you. Look for contrasts. An overt trait often conceals its opposite. People who thump their chests are often cowards. A prudish exterior may hide a lascivious soul. The uptight are often screaming for adventure. The shy are dying for attention. By probing beyond appearances, you will find people's weaknesses in the opposite of the qualities they reveal to you. Find the weak link. Sometimes in your search for weaknesses, it is not what, but who that matters. In today's version of the court, there is often someone behind the scenes who has a great deal of power, a tremendous influence over the person superficially on top. These behind the scenes power groupers are the group's weak link. Win their favor and you indirectly influence the king. Fill the void. Two main emotional voids to fill are insecurity and unhappiness. The insecure are suckers for any kind of social validation. The insecure and the unhappy are the people least able to disguise their weaknesses. The ability to fill their emotional voids is a great source of power, an indefinitely prolongable one. Lastly, feed on uncontrollable emotions. Simply put, uncontrollable emotions can be a paranoid fear, a fear disproportionate to the situation, or any motive such as lust, greed, vanity, or hatred. People in the gripe of these emotions often cannot control themselves, and you can do the controlling for them. You can manipulate the direction that you want them to go in, if you so choose. As you just saw and heard, I didn't go into each little principle offering my perspective, my subjective opinion, and I did that on purpose. I wanted to just display these little principles as objectively as possible. I just wanted to list them out, so you guys can just see the little ways, the little behavioral cues, the little psychological games that can be played. Because there is no keys to power in this law, so that's why I wanted to put this in there. So please let me know whether it was worth even putting that in there. There are 5 observances of the law. I'm only going to cover one for time's sake. So that's why actually purchasing this book and getting it is really important, so you can understand the different types of stories that are encapsulated in this book. Observance 4. I chose this story of Arabella Huntington because it was the most relevant, significant story that can relate to a lot of today's games, power games. So Arabella Huntington was husband of a very wealthy railroad magnate Collis Huntington, and she always struggled for social recognition among her wealthy peers. So even when she held parties, very few of the social elite would even show up, and this affected her. This affected her perspective of herself. This affected her self-esteem. Many just thought she was just a gold digger. And many art dealers would consequently try and court her, but they would do it in a condescending way, so it wouldn't really have effect. Only one man treated her differently. This was Joseph Devine. I've talked about Joseph before in previous laws. And for the first few years of the Devine's relationship with Arabella, he actually made no effort to sell any art to her. Instead, he became her friend. He talked to her, he educated her about art, he accompanied her to different places and events. He taught her that the best art was the most expensive art, but he didn't talk about his art, just the idea of it. Devine would compliment her and act as if she had exquisite taste, even though, before they even met, her aesthetics were abysmal. And when her husband died, she came into fortune, and then she started buying all these expensive paintings, and she obviously then wanted to purchase from Devine. So he sold her Gainsborough Blue Board painting for the highest price ever paid for a work of art at that time, for a family that had never even showed interest in collecting. Interpretation. So this is the lesson. Joseph Devine understood Arabella Huntington and what made her tick. She wanted to feel important, he knew that. And she was intensely insecure about her lower class background, so she needed confirmation of her new social status. He played on this superficiality, but Devine waited, he was patient. Another lesson, the patience. Instead of rushing, as we often do, instead of rushing in to take action, in trying to persuade her to collect art, he went to work subtly on her weaknesses. He made her feel that she deserved his attention not because she was the wife of one of the wealthiest men in the world, but because of her own special character traits. And this melted her. This worked. Devine never condescended Arabella. Rather than lecturing to her, he objectively instilled these ideas indirectly. And the result was one of his best, most devoted clients, and the selling of one of the most expensive pieces at that time. So what does this mean for you and me? It means for you and me to understand the psychology of human beings. People need validation and recognition. They often need to feel important. And this is the best kind of weakness to exploit. And this is the weakness that other people will try and get out of you. They'll try and sell you things based on this weakness. All you have to do is find a way to make people feel better about their taste and their social standings and their intelligence. And once the bait is hooked, you can reel it in again and again for years, just like Devine did. See, they may never suspect that you are turning them like a thumbscrew, and if they do, they may not care, because you're making them feel better about themselves, and that is worth any price. Be careful you are not getting played in a similar way. This doesn't have to be one-on-one by a person, it can be done by the things you own. We can be victims of our own possessions, and these possessions come from organizations that may try and manipulate us into joining a certain cause or cult, just like I've discussed in previous law, on how to join a cult-like figure. Or people may do it more indirectly in playing tactfully off your emotions just like Devine did. Be aware. Reversal. Playing on people's weaknesses has one significant danger. It may stir up an action you cannot control. When you play on a person's vulnerabilities, the areas over which they have the least control, you can unleash emotions that will upset your plans. Push timid people into bold action, they may go too far. Answer their need for attention or recognition, they may need more than what you can give them. The more emotional the weakness, the greater the potential danger. Know the limits to this game, and never get carried away by your control over your victims. You are after power, not thrill of control. Law 33. Discover each man's thumbscrew.